Okay, Math 9. When last I left you, we were talking about reflections, and you've had quite a bit of time to do that homework. I want to go over it, not because when I looked at your homework there seemed to be a problem. It was pretty good. But again, I am not checking every single little detail of your answer. Your answers are at the back of the book, except the ones that you have to draw, the answers are not at the back of the book. So I'm going to, as quickly as possible, go over the questions that required you to draw, and I want you to check your answers. Make sure that you're doing it right. We have a new student. His name is Joshua. Hi, Joshua. Joshua, you can be following along and just making sure that you are understanding what we're doing. I will be going over some of the information, but hopefully you've gone back and watched a couple of the videos. I don't know how much graphing you've done in the past, so if you're having problems, please make sure you connect with me, either through Classroom or Hangouts or whatever. Most of the people in this class are pretty helpful. If you put up a question on Hangouts, sometimes even if I don't answer it, someone else will, which is great. So, number 304. Number 8 was the first one that you had to graph. So I'm gonna do this fairly quickly, I hope. So, number 8. Point A is at 2 and 4. So across 2, so over 2, 1, 2, and up 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is point A. Graph paper is very, very helpful. If you don't have graph paper, then you have to do what I'm doing, and you have to not only put the point, put the letter, but you also have to put its location. This is at 2 and 4. Because, I don't know, maybe your 1 and 2 is much larger than mine. Maybe it's much smaller. I don't know. But you can't do like this is 1 and this is 2. Like, that doesn't make any sense. So just if you're not using graph paper, you're going to have to label. If you are using graph paper, that doesn't mean no labeling, which some of you obviously did. You still have to put the letter. You just don't have to put the 2 and the 4, but you still have to label that that's point A. Otherwise, I don't know that that's point A. Point B is at 1 and 1. So point B is at 1 and 1. And point C is at 6 and 2. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2. And that's point C. So there's the triangle. You must connect the dots to make the triangle, has to be there. Now they want us to reflect it in the x-axis. So the x-axis is the horizontal axis, it's this horizontal line. So if we reflect it, just think of this as being a mirror, or think of it as folding along that line. If you were to take it and reflect it down into here, where would it end up? And we talked about this, good grief, was it Friday? All my days are running together. We talked about this, I think, on Friday, and I said, if you're reflecting in the x-axis, change the sign on your y's. So you're still going to go forward 1 with the B, but instead of going up 1, you're going to go down 1. So B prime, because the little apostrophe after it is what tells me it's the reflected image, is 1 and negative 1. So for point A, I'm still going to go over 2, but I'm not going to go up 4. I'm going to go down 4. So it's going to be at 2 and negative 4. That is A prime. And C prime is going to still go forward 6, but we're going to go down 2. So it's going to be at 6 and negative 2. So that is C prime. So here we have C prime. So it's just been flipped. The other ones are going to be quicker. I just wanted to take my time on that one for anyone who is struggling. 11. 11, I did have a question on 11. Someone asked me a question on 11. What threw them on 11, and this throws a lot of people when I give it to them, is that this is not all just in one section. This triangle's kind of over a couple of different sections. So point P is at 1 and 2, over 1 up 2. And point Q is at -3 and -2. So back 3, down 2. And point R is at 3 and -1. So over 3, down 1. And so some of it's above the x-axis, some of it's below the x-axis. Doesn't matter. The rule doesn't change. If we are reflecting it in the x-axis, any part of it that's above the x-axis is going to flip down to be below. Any part that's below is actually going to flip up to be above. The rule stays the same. If I'm reflecting in the x-axis, I change the sign of my y's. So I'm still going to go forward 1, but I'm going to go down 2. So 1 and -2 would be P prime. I'm still going to go back 3, but I'm going to go up 2. So 3 and +2 would be Q prime. And I'm still going to go forward 3, but I'm only going to go up. I'm going to go up 1. So 3 and 1 would be R prime. So it would look like that. Okay, so it's reflected in the x-axis. Again, mine are just sketches because I do not have graph paper. Graph paper would be preferable. Number 12. Number 12. Number 12, point A is at 1 and 3. Point B is at 2 and 1. And point C is at 6 and 3. So it's like way over here somewhere. So here I have my triangle. Okay. This time they want us to reflect in the y-axis. If I'm reflecting in the y-axis, I change the sign of my x's. My y-axis is the one going up and down. So if I reflect across the y-axis, it's going to just flip to be over here. So point A, instead of going forward 1 and up 3, we're going to go back 1 and up 3. So -1 and 3. That would be A prime. B prime would be -2 and 1. And C prime would be -6 and 3. And so it's just been reflected over here. I'm going to talk through the next couple because I can. So I'm going to tell you where your points should be, okay? So that was number 12. So for number 14, again, you're reflecting in the y-axis, so you're going to change the sign of your x's. So point Q is going to move to be at +2 and 1. Point Q is going to move to be negative, it's going to move from being -3 to being +3 and -3. And Q would move back to be at -1 and -2. Just change the sign on your x's. Number 15, same thing. You're changing the sign on your x's. So R right now is at 2 and 2. So it's going to move to -2 and 2. Point S is at -3 and -1. So it's going to move to +3 and -1. And T right now is at 2 and -2, so it's going to move to be at -2 and -2. So just check your points on your graphs. 16 did not require you to draw anything. 17 did. Again, it's a reflection in the y-axis. And so point A, if you reflect it in the y, change the sign on your x's. Should be at -1 and 1. Point B prime should be at -5 and 2, and C prime should be at -3 and 6. If you're reflecting in the y, change the sign on your x values. 25 and 28, I want to look at because they were a little bit more in depth, especially 28. But 25 says you have a triangle PQR. Oh, my markers are wearing out. I hate that. You know how I feel about that. So, P is -5 and 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. -5 and 6, that's point P. Q is -7 and 2. So -5, 6, 7, 1, 2. -7 and 2, that is point Q. And R is -1 and 1. So make sure, even if you're doing it on graph paper, that there's a P beside this point and a Q beside this point and an R beside that point. They want you to reflect it in the y-axis. If I reflect in the y-axis, you change the sign on your x's. So point P is now going to be forward 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So P prime is at 5 and 6. Q would be at +7 and 2. And R would be at +1 and 1, which is going to be a little bit lower. So it would look something like that. The next part though says now they want you to reflect that image in the x-axis, and I'm looking for another color, sorry. They want you to reflect this image in the x-axis, not this one, this one. They say take P prime, Q prime, R prime, reflect it in the x. So if I'm going to reflect it in the x, that means I'm going to change the sign on my y values. So this point is going to go to 1 and -1, and that's R prime prime because you've moved it twice now. Q is going to be at 7 and -2. So that is Q prime prime, and 5 and -6. All right. So that is number 25. 28. Some of you handed it in, and I know you have it wrong. So really be paying attention to this, because I looked at some of your pictures, and I know they're not right, so you really need to be paying attention. 28 says, triangle A prime prime, B prime prime, C prime prime. So in other words, this triangle's actually been moved a couple of times. And I'm going to start with black, has vertices. A prime prime is 3 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. And B with 2 primes is 2 and 1. 1, 2, and 1. And C is 1 and 3. it's not a huge triangle, pretty little. Now, it says, this image was obtained from the translation. Remember, translation means I move the graph left, right, up, down. I move the triangle in different directions. And they give you a mapping rule of x plus 1 and y minus 2, followed by a reflection in the y-axis. So they took whatever the original triangle was, they did this to it, and then they reflected it in the y-axis, and this is what they ended up with. So what they want you to do is they want you to say, what was the original triangle then? What was the original triangle? So you actually have to work backwards. So order makes a difference here. So they said, we did this, then we did this, and we ended up with this. Sorry. So if I'm going to work backwards, the first thing I'm going to do is actually this. I'm going to reflect it in the x-axis. So y-axis. So if I reflect it in the y-axis, I'm going to change my x's. So this is going to become -2 and 1. This is going to become -1 and 3. And this is going to become -3 and 4. So it's here now. It says, okay, we reflected in the y-axis after we did this to it. So we're working backwards. So they said what we did to it was, to get this, we moved the triangle 1 to the right and down 2. So if you're working backwards, you actually have to do the opposite to it. You actually have to go, instead of going 1 to the right, you actually have to go 1 to the left. And instead of moving it down 2, you actually have to go up 2. You have to do exactly backwards because you're working backwards. So, oh, I didn't label those points, did I? I told you guys you had to, and then I didn't. So this would be A prime, this would be C prime, and this would be B prime. And we're looking for the original, A, B, and C. So, again, I have to work backwards. So, let's take point A. They got this by going forward 1. So we're going to go back 1, which is going to bring us to -4. And they brought it down 2, so we're going to go up 2. 1, 2. Again, if you have graph paper, it makes this kind of a lot easier because you're just counting squares. But if I went back 1, I'm now at -4. If I went up 2, I'm at 6. So it should be at -4 and 6. That would be point A. Check your graph, because a lot of you did not have that there. Point B, instead of going forward 1, I'm going to go back 1 to -3. And I'm going to go up 2 to 3. So I'm actually going to have a point at -3 and 3. That's going to be my B. My C, I'm going to go back 1 to -2, and I'm going to go up 2 to 5. So I'm going to be at -2 and 5. That is my C. So just this moved. It got moved to the right one, to the left 1, and up 2. Please check your answer. Again, just because I give you a 100 on your homework, that just says, yes, I see that you did it, and I looked through it. And what that does is it tells me where the problem areas are. That was a problem area. Please be looking at your picture. All right. Next section, rotations. So we have done translations where you move the graph left, right, up, down. We have done reflections where you reflect it in an x-axis, reflect it in the y-axis. Now we're going to do rotations. I will be honest with you, I find rotations The most difficult one to do. My brain just doesn't do it very well for whatever reason, and I don't know why, but my brain doesn't do it very well. But when we're talking rotations, we are talking about turning the graph. I thought I had it. No, I don't. Maybe I do. Just a sec. Yep, I do. Years of teaching this, okay? So if I have this, okay, here's my graph, and here's my triangle. If this is right side up, okay, all of my points are here in this section. Later on in higher grades, we learned that this is actually called a quadrant, and this is quadrant number 1, but that's later. But everything is here. We can do different types of rotations. We can do 90-degree rotations, 180-degree rotations, and 270-degree rotations. And direction matters. When we talk about direction, we talk about clockwise, which we shorten to CW. Clockwise just means the way an analog clock goes. If you are unfamiliar with a clock, you should be familiar with a clock because we have one in our classroom, right? But a clock turns this way, right? So that is clockwise. Counterclockwise is represented by CCW, and it goes the opposite way of a clock. So it goes this way, all right? Now, so if I'm standing here, and this is going to be backwards to you, so hold on, I always have to think about this. All right, so if this will help. If I'm standing here, clockwise is this way, counterclockwise is this way, right? So if I do a 90 degrees clockwise rotation, 90 degrees means a quarter of a turn. So I just turn and face in this direction. If I did a 90-degree turn counterclockwise, I would go this way, and so I'd be facing in this direction. If I do a 180-degree turn, honestly, direction doesn't matter, because 180 degrees means I'm going to turn and face exactly in the opposite direction. So it actually doesn't matter whether I go clockwise or counterclockwise on that one, because I end up in the same place. 270 degrees is 3/4 of a turn. So again, if I'm standing here and I go 270 degrees clockwise, here's 90, here's 180, here's 270. I end up facing this way. So a 90-degree clockwise, a 90-degree counterclockwise turn will end me up here. A 270-degree clockwise turn will end me up here, same place, all right? So 90 degrees clockwise, sorry, that's not what I wanted. 90 degrees is a quarter turn. 180 degrees is half a turn. And 270 degrees is 3/4 of a turn. And if you really need it, 360 degrees all the way around, right? Now, the part that gets wonky for me is finding where the new points are. I can turn it, but where are the new points? Because sometimes my X's and my Y's end up flipping places. Sometimes the signs change. So I really have to work each one on its own, kind of. I just have to work them out. There was at one point I came up with a set of rules, but the rules were so confusing, it didn't really help much. So if I think about it, so let's say we have this, okay? And if I said do a 90-degree clockwise turn, I do this with my book. I end up just turning my book. If I turn my book, now it's actually down here. So everything is in a totally different place. If I do a 180 turn, there's 90, there's now it's down here, okay? So I actually turn my book sometimes in order to figure it out. my brain doesn't twist things very well. When I did portions of an IQ test, that's actually part of an IQ test, believe it or not, where they give you a shape, not a three-dimensional shape with lots of different corners and things. And they actually say, okay, now if I turn this 270 degrees clockwise, what would it look like now? I don't do that well. So this is not the strongest part of math for me. That's okay, we can still do it, it's all right. So, when it comes to, when it comes to rotations, we rotate around the center. We're always going to rotate around the axis. So if we have an XY axis, our turn center, the place we're spinning it around, is always going to be here. But that's not always the case. If they don't give you that, because I'm going to give you some questions, I think that, do I? Or do I skip them? I skip them. It's okay, never mind. So the turn center is where it's turning from. In our case, when we have a graph, we're always just going to turn the whole graph, okay? So I'm going to go over the example, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the first couple of questions I'm going to give you, although I have a problem because if you remember, my textbook doesn't have colors in it. It's all totally black and white. And the first one is color reliant, so I'll have to describe what you do, but I can't tell you what the answer is because I don't actually have colors in mine. So example, well, the only example on page 306 says triangle RST has vertices at -5 and 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 0. So this is R. S is -1 and 0. This is S. And T is -2 and -3. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. So here is my triangle. Now, they say, draw the image. That means you have to be accurate. You have to put it in the right places. Draw the image. I'm going to look for my purple marker because I like purple. Draw the image after a 180-degree rotation clockwise. So I'm going to turn this 180 degrees. Now, for some of you for whom this is difficult, and I'm never the only one, for some of you for whom this is difficult, actually take your page and turn it 180 degrees clockwise and look at where that is, because you can do that, all right? So this point is going to go 180 degrees to here. It is now at 1 and 0. That would be S prime. This one is going to go 180 degrees, so it's going to do a full turn. It's now going to be at +5 and 0. That is T prime. This is going to go 180 degrees, and it's actually going to be here, which is now forward 2 and up 3. So all of the signs changed. All of the signs changed. So it's the same triangle. It's just, I drew it bigger for some reason, but it shouldn't be bigger. That's just me. Okay, but it completely rotated 180 degrees. Again, to be honest with you, this is the section that I struggle with the most. It does tend to be the section that if you're going to struggle in this chapter, this is usually the one. Not all the time, but it usually is the one. So I'm going to post some homework. I'm going to post some for you to try, but the first ones I'm going to get you to do like are number 1 and number 3. And it says the green flag has been rotated about the origin. The purple flag is the image. Name the rotation. So the green one is where you started. The purple one is where you ended up. Now I do have arrows, so that's helpful. So by reading that and by looking at the arrows that I can see, I just happen to have green and purple out here. The green flag has been rotated about, the purple flag is the image. So I'm assuming that the green flag in number 1 is the one that is straight up and down. And then I think, if I'm looking at it, again, I don't have colors, so I'm going off what they're saying here. The purple one, I think, is here, because they've got a little arrow like this. So the question that they're asking is name the rotation. So if I was naming this rotation, it went 90 degrees and it went counterclockwise. So my answer would be 90 degrees counterclockwise. That's all they're looking for. Don't overcomplicate that, all right? There is a significant amount of drawing in this. I will be going over the drawing answers again because the answers are not at the back of the book. If you're struggling with it, please let me know so that I kind of know how many are having a hard time with it. That's it for today, and we'll talk to you again soon. Don't forget to upload your homework into Google Classroom. I know most of you know that, but just a reminder, and for Joshua who is new, I will post the homework, so you'll see it first thing Tuesday morning. So on Monday morning, I will be checking it. So you really have all day Tuesday to get it done and get it uploaded into Google Classroom. All right, if you're having trouble with how do I do that, talk to me, post it in Google Hangouts. But when you submit it, you go into today's work, which would be April 28th. Up in the right-hand corner, there should be a place for you to upload your file and to turn in your homework. I don't actually see what you see when you look at Google Classroom versus what I look at in Google Classroom. So some others of you in the class might be able to describe that a little better than I did because you know what you're seeing. I see something different because I'm the teacher. So anyway, we'll talk to you again soon. Let me know if there are issues. I will be going over most of this homework because most of it is drawing. All right, talk to you soon.